What is up, YouTube? What is up, family? We have another request. We got how the Dutch shaped Indonesia. I have no idea. I'm about to find out. No, I guess there'd be no Indonesia without the Dutch. Is that what he's saying? I don't know. It's always interesting to find out.
This is Indonesia, a fascinating country you never heard of. And it wouldn't have existed without the Dutch. Indonesia is huge. It's the fourth biggest in population, the biggest Muslim country in the world. The country has a great variety.
Did they just... Oh, China 1.4? Really? India's 1. India's that close? Wow, I had no idea.
Biggest in population, the biggest Muslim country in the world. The country has a great variety of cultures, religions, and people in their borders.
Yep.
But these borders have not been shaped by Indonesian peoples. They are a direct legacy of their colonial past, shaped by Dutchmen in their greedy quest for wealth. What is weird is that these borders were only finished a few decades before Indonesia won its independence. And these colonial borders and the resources within them give Indonesia trouble to this day. So how did these borders come into being? How do they influence the present? How did we get here? I'm in the Indische Buurt in Amsterdam. This is a place where the streets are named after possessions the Dutch had in the East Indies. This part of the city was built in the 1900s, and it sort of coincides with the end of the Dutch imperial project in Indonesia. And with it, the city seems to show that all these far-flung places are actually part of one grand unified theme. The only problem with that is that it's a total construct. It is a construct that we call Indonesia. This name, meaning Indian island, was used in the 1800s.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that Indonesia means Indian island. Learn something new every day.
By English researchers. The Dutch prefer to call it the Netherlands East Indies. India, or just the East. A construct that was only finished after a colonial project of subjugation, blood and extraction that lasted 350 years.
What?
Of course, the history of the region doesn't start when the Europeans arrive. Indonesia has been at the crossroads of international trade for millennia.
We just learned
Take
about
this
that.
700-year-old batik. Batik is a decorative technique that originates
Hey, we just did a video about this.
in Java. But the cloth they made it with came all the way from India. Trade brought religion, Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam. In honor of these religions, great shrines were built. But this was in no means a unified territory. Across the 70,000 or so islands that make up modern Indonesia, there was a huge number of kingdoms and sultanates. The Hindu-Buddhist Majapahit Empire from the
We just watched that video. That's so cool.
1300s looks the most like modern-day Indonesia. It had a strong core and kingdoms that were aligned with it.
Yeah.
But it was already long gone when the Europeans arrive. They come for these spices that can be found in the Moluccas. First the Portuguese and then the Dutch arrive. In the end, the Dutch conquer a huge part of the archipelago. They didn't really set out to conquer all this land. They just wanted spices at first. But an unexpected change made them slowly embrace a way bigger imperialistic goal. This imperialistic project went in 5 phases.
That's a good game. You never played Monopoly? Oh.
In the first, the Dutch try very hard to gain a monopoly on the spice trade, because that's what makes the most money. They do this with a private company, the Dutch East India Company, or VOC. Along the way, they actually invented stocks and the stock market. But they're there for spices like cinnamon, cloves, pepper and nutmeg. They use them to cook and for medicine. How fortunate that you can't find nutmeg anywhere in the world but here. I have to tell you a bit about what an insane company this VOC was, what they could do. Because they could enter into diplomatic relations, they could declare war, they could invade lands, keep a standing army. Imagine Apple one day just deciding to invade China.
But there is one more thing.
The Dutch start with trade though. they made a contract with the Bandanese, where the nutmeg grows. But these people, they understood market capitalism, so they also traded with the English. And that really pisses the Dutch off, big time. Remember, they're here for monopoly. They can't have people trading with everyone. The governor, Jan Pieterszoon Koen, hires Japanese samurai to butcher village elders. They depopulate the complete island.
I tell you, I know humans are crazy today. They are. We're crazy today. But back in those days, absolute lunatics. I mean, really. It's like, oh, you don't agree with me? Oh, well then I'll just kill everybody. Like that was actually a normal thought back then. It seems like everywhere you look, it was nothing but war, 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 war back then. People.
Thousands die in this genocide. At home, not everyone was pleased.
No.
The predecessor of Koen said, "In an empty sea, on empty lands, with dead people, you can't make a profit." But that's not what Koen thought. Next to subjugating complete islands, the Dutch also strike deals with local kings and sultans. They can keep their throne, as long as they serve the Dutch. And in the end, the Dutch make it. They have a monopoly on the spice trade. Finally. And then, well, tastes change. Suddenly, these heavy stews of medieval times that needed a lot of spices are not so popular anymore. They are replaced by French cuisine, truffles, oysters, crab. Has all the bloodshed been for nothing? So what do the Dutch do with this tropical destination? Well, the people in the 1700s do want sugar, tobacco, cacao, tea, coffee. But compared to spices, these crops have one problem. They are built on plantations that need land, a lot of land. So suddenly the Dutch need to expand their base of operations. They start more wars to claim land and...
See? Oh, we need that land. You gotta leave. We need that.
expand their colonial possession. Do you have any idea why a cup of coffee is sometimes called a cup of Java?
I know, it's called Kopi Mana Kopi.
Well, the Dutch, they introduced coffee on this island. For some time, they become the biggest exporters of coffee of the whole world. Chinese planters produce sugar, tobacco is planted. The Dutch, they had started with a few outposts, but are now growing into a bigger colonial state. And it works, they're making money again. But the frenzy, it doesn't last. It turns out that you can make sugar and coffee in other places. They don't have a monopoly, and the cost of maintaining a huge empire is just too high. In 1799, the VOC goes bankrupt. And at the same time, the Netherlands are overrun by Napoleon. Is this the end of the Dutch colonial project in the Indies?
Probably not.
Well, not really. Occupation of the Indies continues. First a brief stint under French and then English rule. Later, when Napoleon is defeated, the Dutch get their colony back. And they get a present. While they were away, a governor started this whole new thing, a colonial army, with recruits drawn from all over the archipelago. It is called the KNIL. A lot of recruits sign up from the Moluccas, because that spice trade that wasn't so lucrative anymore, they needed a job. And the Dutch, they had some ideas how to use this new army.
Yeah, to take more land. I'm guessing.
Because this is really a time the Dutch are occupying even more land in their archipelago.
But I tell you.
Why so? Well, the Napoleonic conquest ravaged the Netherlands. The new Dutch king, he needs a source of income. And where does he look? The Dutch Indies, of course. He wants money. He starts to lease land to farmers to tax them. And he also works with the local kings. But that doesn't end well. The kings exploit their farmers. So much that even the Dutch think it's going too far. So they end this arrangement. And that really pisses off the kings. So you have this prince, Diponegoro, who starts a huge war on Java. He waged this guerrilla war for 5 years and the Dutch retaliate. 200,000 people die, mostly of starvation. It's one of the last times that local elites try to resist Dutch advances, but they are crushed in the end. And just when the situation seems to be under control in Indonesia, the Belgians secede from the northern Netherlands. They want to be an independent country. Like whatever, do what you want, we don't need you. But now the Dutch king needs even more money to finance a costly war. Where should all this money be coming from?
The people. You take the money from the people.
Well, this king got a brilliant idea. What if we tax the local population? They shouldn't give money, but culture goods. Coffee, cacao, rubber. They may not have money, but they can farm.
Greed, for lack of a better word, is good.
Great movie, by the way. Great movie.
So suddenly the whole population of Java, the farmers, had to use 1/5 of their plots to make these culture goods. If you couldn't or didn't have a farm, you had to work 66 days for years in a government plantation. This was called the cultuurstelsel. And for the Dutch, the cultuurstelsel becomes a huge success. Up to half of the total revenue for the Netherlands in the 1850s comes from the cultuurstelsel. Half. But Dutch and local rulers squeeze the local population and ask more and more of the
Greed.
farmers. These farmers can't even make enough rice, which leads to famines, and the system leads to an outcry by a colonial employee, Multatuli. He writes this book, Max Havelaar, that describes the atrocities in the colony. It really resonates in the Netherlands with all the injustice done to the locals and slowly means an end to the government-led cultuurstelsel. But is this the end of the exploitation? No.
Imperialism, yeah.
Dutch private corporations jump in the hole left by the cultuurstelsel. They build plantations that need more and more land. And the Dutch are ready to get it. Between 1816 and 1914, the KNIL launches some 200 military expeditions. Some are small and some are endless. Over half the final colony is conquered in this period. And this is really also what's happening in the rest of the world. In 1800, European powers only occupied about 30% of the world. In 1914, 84%. Changes in the world have repercussions in the colony. When the Suez Channel is opened in 1869, the far edges of this region suddenly become super important. Ships that used to arrive from the southwest suddenly start arriving through the Strait of Malacca, next to the Sultanate of Aceh. Aceh is a strong, independent state with a strict interpretation of Islam, and they want to keep it that way. They fiercely resist the Dutch advances. It takes 40 years of war and the lives of 100,000 people to pacify this stretch of land. When General von Heutz, one of the Dutch heroes of this war, dies, he gets a state funeral that's only reserved for royals. Yeah, he really was a big shot. But there we have it. Indonesia was finally completed. 300 years after their first arrival, the quest of the Dutch started with spices, transformed in an insane imperial project. A nation of 5 million people lorded over 40 million Indonesians. The colony was the biggest producer of sugarcane. They built coffee, tea, tobacco, rubber. They mined gold, extracted oil, all supported by cheap and plentiful labor from the colonies in China, breaking their back for the Dutch. And slowly the idea started to take hold that the Dutch maybe have some responsibility for all these peoples.
You think?
They imprinted the idea that all these different people actually were one, all under Dutch rule. This didn't really have the effect the Dutch anticipated though, because it's in these schools that ideas of independence begin to brew. Later, revolution leaders such as Hatta, Sharir and Sukarno get educated by the Dutch. They developed this idea of unifying all these different peoples in one state, based on the territory of the colony.
The fight for independence and the creation of a nation state from the rubble of this colonial empire is far from easy. The path to a modern Indonesia leads past insurrections, a fight with the former colonizer, and enduring internal insecurity. We will cover this path in part 2 of this series.
Oh, look at that. I stopped it with 1 second left. That's good. How the Dutch shaped Indonesia. So they try to kill everybody. They try to steal all the land. They wanted to have a monopoly on all the goods. Lovely people, very nice people, these Dutch people. And then, yeah, it took, one or two, took several people in Indonesia. Where is he? That man in the middle. That's pretty good. I only had to go back 3 times. Click, 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 and boom, it landed right here. Right? These people here this is what really made Indonesia, no? Yes, the Dutch kind of laid it out, but not in the way you guys, not in a nice way. They weren't trying to help, I don't think. They weren't trying to help. But history is interesting, but history seems to have one thing in common, no matter what time you go backwards. When it's the 1800s, when it's the 1700s, we did something with French, with the French kings and leaders going all the way back to the 1400s. Every century is a war, another war, and then they fought them, and then they fought him, and then they wanted more. It's all man and greed. Every time, it's greed. Probably like 90% of wars is just greed. It's a shame. But look at Indonesia today. Look at it today. It's thriving. It's beautiful. Most diverse country in the world. Best views I've ever seen. Seriously, like, I thought, Avatar is a movie. Indonesia is like the real Avatar. It's not even believable. Some of the scenery, not even believable. But it's beautiful. And everybody, more or less seems happy. They know what they have. They're not materialistic. They have their life, and they're happy with it. If they can eat one, Now, I see some of you got the wrong idea. I never said like all of Indonesia is poor. I just said this, just like every country, every city, you got a poor section. And I promise you, when you go to the poor section in California, United States, and you see all the homeless people outside, ain't nobody smiling. Nobody's smiling. Nobody's happy. But if you go to areas in Jakarta where you could see, people got literally a shack is where they live. A shack. And they probably have enough to buy like a loaf of bread for like the 5 kids and the husband and wife. And they're smiling. They're like this in the street. That's what I'm saying. That's the difference. It's just, I don't know. It's different. It's a different place. It's a different place that normal people aren't used to. And he's right. How many people really talk about Indonesia when you think of countries to talk about? He said forgotten Indonesia. A lot of people don't even know it exists. Well, he might be right. I don't know. But we'll just keep making videos so the whole world knows about Indonesia. Okay? Yeah. We'll keep making Indonesian videos. This way everybody knows there's a place called Indonesia. It's out there somewhere. You got to find it. It's just pick an island. 1 out of 70,000. Just pick an island. Any island. And you're in Indonesia. Okay. All right, got it? How the Dutch shaped Indonesia. Messed up story, but I guess they did in a way. Take care. Peace out. Have a good night. This video was Man Tap.